Hey guys, it's Justin again with another video. This is going to be a couple different things all rolled into one. This is in a couple ways an unboxing. It's kind of an announcement, it's kind of a work in progress, and it's kind of a tutorial. So, what we have here is an SD resin Zaku. Here is the box it came in. Nothing special. It's got a picture of it on the side. It shows the model number and the commander type, as well as the caster is Magic Cast. I got this on eBay. And this is going to be a part of a really kind of slow build off with Jordan, or a lot of you know him as Ed. He's a good friend of mine. We chat all the time, and we've been doing build offs with a couple of our friends. He's introduced me to a lot of people that he knows, and we've just been excuse me, building kits and having fun and hanging out and stuff like that. So as far as the whole tutorial angle of this video, none of this is really the right or wrong way to do this per se. It's just the way that I've been picking up how to handle resin and how to work with it. My friend Dave has lots of videos on his channel about resin. He loves it. He works with it. He's really good at cleaning it up. Picked his brain a little bit. Another one is Matt Morozek. He's done a lot of resin, and I really look up to his like some of his skills and stuff like that. So if you have any like serious doubts about what I'm doing, you should go check their channels out. They have wonderful little tips and stuff like that all over the place, and you'll probably learn a little bit more there than you will here. But on the off chance you want to see what I do, here it is. So resin is basically a different type of material for casting pieces in. I don't know what its other uses are, or where it's other, found in other ways. But in the modeling world, it's just a different material. It's a little more hazardous than dealing with plastic and stuff like that. But as far as casting the pieces, rather than casting like hollow small pieces, resin is a little bit more brittle than plastic, so it's a little less forgiving when it comes to working with it. And there's no type of like materials that can bond it together like plastic glue and stuff like that, so you have to use different things and you have to do different things when you're working with resin. So this Zaku came with 2 large bags of pieces, a small Ziploc with some LED components, and 3 sheets of paper. This is just kind of like a manufacturer's thing. And then these are the instructions. The instructions are just printed on paper, and they show how to assemble the pieces, what parts to use, all that good stuff. Excuse me. So the first thing we're going to look at on the instructions is actually the parts list. This is really important because with resin, where it's not produced, I guess, necessarily in a factory under the same circumstances that you would necessarily, I guess, buy a Bandai kit, where the parts are machine injection molded and then quality checked and stuff like that. You might not get everything. There might be some flaws in your pieces, things like that, and it's always important to check and make sure you have everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a cut here, and I'm going to cut all these pieces out of the bags. For that, it's nothing special. I would show it, but it's just going to take a little while. But all I do is I take a knife and I just go along a section of bags, and then I put the pieces on the table. Nothing to it. So give me a minute, and I'll come back and we'll look at what to do next. Okay, So now that everything is out and about and on the table, what I like to do is I take a Sharpie or a pen or whatever I want, and I go down the list and I check off the pieces. Now you can do this one of two ways. It depends on how many pieces there are. For this to one way to be easier than the other. Sometimes I like to go down the list and mark them one at a time as they appear, but where there's so many of these, I think I'm just going to pick it up, find it on the sheet, mark it off. So what do I do when I've got all these pieces so I don't lose them? I take a couple of these Ziploc containers and I just kind of pop one open and I'll throw all the pieces in. So I think I'm going to separate it head, body, legs, and then I'll do arms and weapons in the other. So, or never mind, that's not going to work right now. I'll do that later. But for now, I'm going to just go ahead and go down this list. And the way I'm going to do this one is I'm going to grab a piece, find it on the list. So this piece right here is, from the looks of things, 19. Put a little check, 19 in the bucket. And just keep going. So this is 2. This is a leg. So 25. And if there are two pieces that are slightly different, sometimes I'll just put them, next to each other, make sure they are actually different, and then just mark each one off. Because sometimes they put odd pictures, so it's a little harder to tell sometimes. But that's as easy as that is. You find the part on the thing, you check it off, and make sure you have it. That way you know nothing is missing. If something's missing, you need to contact whoever you bought the kit from immediately and let them know. And usually, depending on where you got it, you'll be able to get a replacement part relatively quickly. And usually I don't think it costs anything either. So it's always important, even if you're not going to build the kit right away, to inspect all your pieces and make sure everything's there. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and we'll come back with the next part. Okay, so now that everything is accounted for, I've gone through and checked off everything. Everything is present. Once you're ready to move on to the next step, there's one of two ways you can go with this. You can either begin to clean off your gate marks, which are pretty easy to identify. Basically, it's anything that sticks off that shouldn't. But sometimes there's pieces that are a little tricky, and you're not really so sure. I guess we'll use this as an example. There's a plug here, but there's a thing sticking off of it. And sometimes there'll be like a plug, and then there's another gate that sticks off, and excuse me. And it sort of looks like a gate mark as well, but it's not. So you just have to look around and make sure that what you're getting rid of is actually a gate. And I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. But first, I like to clean my parts. For resin, this is absolutely necessary because it's hard enough to get paint to bond to resin on its own as it is. But with the mold release agent that they use to get the mold out of the or get the pieces out of the mold, it makes it almost impossible for paint to stick. So what this is my Purple Pond of Doom. This is 50% purple power, 50% water. I just thin it down and I go ahead and just put my pieces inside, and I let them soak for a couple of hours. I take them out and I let them dry, and then I inspect all the pieces and make sure that everything looks good. So this part is one of the more time-consuming parts that you don't really actually have to do anything, but it does take a little while because you have to wait. So I'm going to go ahead and get all these soaked. We'll come back when everything is ready for the next step, and that's going to be cleanup. And then I think that's where I'm going to end this video. So give me a second and I will be right back. Okay, so once you've let your parts soak for a couple hours in the Purple Power or whatever degreaser, I like to lay them out on a towel and let them dry for a little bit. Oh, a thing to note is when you take your pieces out of the purple powder, I recommend using gloves. I read on the bottle that it is a skin irritant, apparently. So, you know, rather be safe than sorry. But when you're all finished, your pieces will look significantly better. These are still a little bit damp, but you know, they feel different. And the big place where you'll notice change is on like clear pieces. They don't seem to be like as foggy. This thing, when I pulled it out of the bag, it was a little bit foggy, but now it's a little bit more glassy. And I'm going to buff that out a little bit more with some sandpaper and get it nice and smooth. But for the most part, it's pretty good. But the next step and the last thing I'm going to talk about in this video is removing and trimming your gates. And for this, you're going to need a couple of different tools. Where did they go? The tools aren't much different than what you're going to use for Gunpla. They're actually mostly the same. A couple things are different, of course. You're going to need a cutter. I used the crappiest pair of cutters I have around. I literally bought these just for resin and stuff like that. And you're only going to use these for like larger gates. This kit doesn't really have any larger gates, fortunately enough. They seem to have left them all pretty short. So these probably won't be needed. Yeah, whatever. It's always good to have a knife around. Whether or not you use it is another story. And my always go-to, especially for flat pieces, is a metal file. Again, for larger gates, if you don't trim them off with where'd that thing go? I don't know. If you don't trim them off with a pair of cutters, a bigger file is nice to have around as well. But again, same as before, there aren't very many large gates, so I don't think I'm going to need this guy. This is my flat one. So we're going to stick with the small file. And for rounded pieces, you're going to need different sandpapers. These are all cut into little squares. 600, 800, 1000, 1200, 1500, and 2000 is going to go up here. Just different grits, and depending on what you're doing, you're going to use different grits of sandpaper. So we're going to start with a nice flat piece. Now, obviously you're going to have to identify what your gate is, and this is a really nice piece to start with because there's no gates on it, there's no pegs on it, it's just the gate that's sticking out from where it's not supposed to be. And for this, I like to use my file, and what I do is I just sand it in one direction. Just go and go and go and go. And this is one of the more time-consuming parts of the process, because you're going to need sandpaper as well for this, because these kind of give you a rough cut. Every once in a while you might want to flip your file over just to make sure you aren't clogging it up, and wipe it off on something every once in a while as well. But eventually you will smooth it down to the point where you are also making contact with the rest of the piece, and the gate is mostly gone. I hope I got all that on camera. I would be really upset if I didn't. But then, a thing of water. What I would do is I would take some water here, and I would just get a piece of 1000 grit sandpaper. It's probably my favorite grit to use. 800 and 1000. I use those the most frequently. But use whatever you're most comfortable with. Just dip it in some water and just kind of very lightly, very gently go along the surface and buff all the tiny scratches and stuff out from the file. And that looks pretty good, so that piece is good to go. You can see there's no more gate. It's nice and clean. And then what I also like to do is inspect the piece as a whole, see if there's any imperfections. As you can see very clearly, there's a little bit of something going on there. It's just like a small dip in the cast, so I'm just going to try and sand that out too while I'm at it. Not quite yet, but there we go. Good as new. So, some imperfections are a little easier to deal with than others. That was pretty simple, very straightforward. Just a matter of identifying the issue and working with it. Sometimes you'll get like small bubbles or dips where the resin didn't quite fill all the way. This doesn't appear to have any of that, so that's good. For those, you just use a little bit of putty. Just kind of dilute it a little bit if you need to, and kind of put it in the thing, let it dry, and then sand it out. We can do a couple more pieces so you can get an idea how to clean up other areas. But what I like to do is sometimes I'll separate my pieces so I have like a done bin and then an unfinished bin, and I'll move pieces from one to the next as I work on them. One of the trickier gates to deal with is one on an area like this skirt here. And the reason that it's tricky is because this is on a rounded edge, but they put it on in a way that you can kind of get it really easily. So what I'm going to do is, yeah, that whole thing is a gate. So this is where I'm going to use my cutters. And I'm actually going to try and get right up against this. And I'm just going to cut that away. That way it's a little more flush, I guess. And then I'm going to come in here with my file and go this way so I don't mess this piece up here. So just go ahead and nice and easily come in here. You don't have to use too much pressure. You don't want to kind of force yourself off the piece or to go in a weird direction or angle. Just let the file do all the work for you. All you're doing is guiding it. And it's starting to become a little bit uneven, so if I keep going like I'm going, I'm going to actually sand away the actual piece, and that's not what I want to do. I'm getting a little better. Just kind of use your thumb as a guide so you don't hit small details and stuff like that. Just a little bit more. This is one of the dumber gates. I don't know why this one is here, but it is. What can I do? Alright, I also noticed there's a small spot right here, so we're gonna get that too. Just kind of rough that little uneven spot out. Looking good. And then back to the sandpaper. So zoom out real quick just a little bit. And just gently sand that. And that one is done as well. So again, you want to kind of inspect it and make sure everything looks the way that it should. There's no cracks or imperfections. Make sure everything is the way that you want it to look. And we'll throw it in the bin with the other new ones, or finished ones. We're going to go ahead and do one more. Let's pick a weird one. I saw one that I wanted to do earlier. Where'd it go? This one will work because it's on a bend. So for this one, again, I'd trim it just a little bit, try and get it away from the thing a little bit, and I'd use my file to go with whatever way is longest, or whichever like more the gate is on. So more the gate is on the wide part than on this side. So I'm going to just very, very gently, very slowly, just kind of file that out. And I guess that's pretty good. I think I'm going to get a little bit closer. There we go. Okay. So next, back to the sandpaper. We're just going to kind of go against this piece like this. We're just going to sand it like it's one giant piece. Most of our sandpaper should catch this corner here, but we just kind of keep attacking the little area until it's nice and smooth. Alright, that looks pretty good, I think. Zoom in so you can see where I removed it. So, it's not quite perfect, but at this exact moment you can't really tell where it was. There's a little bit of junk right here. Just go ahead and smooth that out real quick. Go. That looks a lot better. And this is the longest part of building resin, is kind of getting your cleanup done and making sure that everything looks good. There's a couple of other like cleanup build steps that you need to follow before you can start painting. But as a whole, you know, the biggest part is getting everything prepped for paint. And if you go through all these steps, it'll make applying paint to your to your resin a lot easier, and things will go a lot smoother. So that's all I'm going to do in this video. So hopefully if you guys have anything to build along, you guys will be able to get that all cleaned up by the time I get around to the next video, which should hopefully be in about a week. But don't hold me to that because I'm busy. And I hate it. So I'm going to finish this up, and then when it's time to start with the next piece or the next bit, I'll start recording again. And this shouldn't take too long to do. It'll take a little while because there's a lot of tiny pieces and stuff like that. And cleanup on those is about the same. You just have to be more careful and work with tinier tools and stuff like that. But I think you guys can handle it. So next time we're gonna finish cleanup and paint prep, and then we're gonna move into dry fitting and making sure everything kind of works the way it's supposed to, and then we'll go from there. So thank you guys for watching and sitting through this, what is probably going to be a really long video, and I appreciate everything. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Later.